Little battery pack microphone, so I hope I'm not too loud. If I am, just do this. My name is Jan Spooner, and I am the English language learner and dyslexia coordinator for the district. And we are here tonight to talk about K-3 reading, the Move On When Reading letter, and describing that, defining some of the terms in there, and then talking about what those essential skills are that young students need to learn to become proficient readers. And I am very happy to introduce the team that helped me put this together. And that is, if I could have Heather and Lisa, if you would like to wave, get up and turn around if you'd like. Heather and Lisa are both SUSD parents. And after we had our dyslexia information night last spring, we kind of came together, a couple of others as a result, and someone else who's going to be coming, who is actually a dyslexia consultant. Her name is Cheryl Anthony. We started to communicate, how can we better reach out to parents to offer support? And then I started talking to Heather. Lisa contacted me. I said, hey, you want to join us? We're putting on this information night because we really want to be able to support parents, help them support their students at home. So thank you, team, for helping with this. And we also have 3 of our reading specialists here. We have Janet Turner, Joe Passett, and Kim Snyder. And also Jess Bonnier is our Director of Student Services attending tonight. Also, Mr. Bonner, he was going to be here, but his daughter was in is in a community college national women's soccer tournament tonight. So the outcome of this could be really, really good for her. So he wanted to be able to be with her for that. So he sends his apologies that he could not be here. All right, with that, we're going to go ahead and begin the presentation. So our agenda tonight is to look at that Move On When Reading letter, and then look at foundational skills, K-3 foundational skills, and then how might we support students at home. And then we're also going to talk about a new group we are forming called the SUSD Family Reading Connection Group, and Lisa is going to talk more about that. And I also have to introduce Paloma Lizarraga. She is here as a translator and interpreter for anyone who needs Spanish translation or interpretation. And at the end, we will have time for questions and answers. And I think we have some folks online as well, viewing through our live stream. So welcome to them as well. Okay, if you have questions during the presentation, I think because we're a small group, we can absolutely answer questions. If you have a question that you don't want to ask in front of anyone and you just want it answered, Ms. Bonnier has index cards and pencil. Perhaps just raise your hand and she can come and get you an index card and a pencil so you can write your question down, and she'll collect them so that we can read them out at the end. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is the Move On When Reading Parent Letter 2. Now, you may or may not have received this. So if you haven't received this, we're going to be talking about what it means. Hello, Cheryl. I'm going to embarrass you now. This is Cheryl Anthony, and she is our local dyslexia consultant who's been an enormous wealth of support for all of us. I had just talked about you, Cheryl, so you came in at just the right time. Thanks for coming. So we're going to talk about how the Move On When Reading, which is legislation that has been around since 2012, but we now have dyslexia legislation that sort of sits on top of the Move On When Reading legislation. And the reason for that is because we found out that we were not always identifying students who had really specific needs that needed to be addressed, and they were kind of slipping through the cracks. They didn't qualify for special education, but they weren't necessarily being served well in the general education classroom either. So we had to find a way to identify them so that we could give them the services that they need. And that is what the Move On When Reading Parent Letter 2 is about. It's not just about dyslexia. We don't diagnose dyslexia, but it is about just recognizing that we need to drill down when we do assessments to figure out what a problem might be for a student. So we have just a very short video here from the Department of Education that talks about Move On When Reading, just to give you more information about it.
Learning to read is the start of a lifelong adventure that will take children to many places near and far. The ability to read is the foundation for all learning. When students leave 3rd grade with strong reading skills, they are better positioned for success in the classroom and in life. That's why Arizona established Move On When Reading, which helps parents and educators develop strong readers. Schools identify students who may struggle with early reading skills. Parents of students who are not reading on grade level are notified and given strategies and tools to support reading at home. Teachers receive training to ensure they have the knowledge and skills to teach all kids to read. Students are provided with targeted supports to meet their reading needs, starting in kindergarten. Their progress is monitored throughout the year to keep educators and parents up to date. At the end of 3rd grade, students must demonstrate sufficient reading skills for promotion to 4th grade. Students who are retained receive an extra year of specialized support so they are ready to enter 4th grade as strong readers. Since the enactment of this policy, Arizona students have made steady progress, but there is still more work to do. Parents are key partners in supporting reading success. Here are 3 tips to make reading a fun part of your everyday activities. Read together for at least 20 minutes every day. Ask a teacher or librarian to help choose books that match your child's interests and reading level. Encourage your child to read during everyday activities, from street signs to recipes. Together, parents and teachers can help students meet important milestones so they can become strong readers who are prepared for the adventure ahead.
Parents and teachers is really what we want to promote. So we're just going to unpack that video a bit. So schools identify K-3 students who are not making adequate progress, and then parents are notified through the Move On When Reading Letter 2. Teachers receive and are receiving training in evidence-based reading practices, which for many represent maybe a new way of teaching, especially if teachers have been in the profession for a very long time. Students are provided with targeted support, and their progress is monitored regularly. And really key, I'll say it again, parents are key partners in this. Reading to your child. And note, it doesn't say they're reading to you, you read together, or you read to them. It's just that opportunity to read together. Ask your teacher or librarian, we have a librarian right out in the hall, ask them for help in choosing books for your child. And make reading a part of everyday activities. Reading signs and labels, there's text all around us, so take every opportunity to read with your student. All right, so when I got together with my amazing parent team, we went over the Move On When Reading letter really, really carefully. And they chose terms that they thought were kind of confusing. If you're not an educator, a lot of these terms can be very confusing. So we decided to highlight a few key terms and define them. So benchmark, what does benchmark mean? A benchmark is a measurement of a student's progress. And it's typically geared towards a grade level. So if we say your student is reading at benchmark, they're reading at grade level. They're reading at an expected level of proficiency. If they are below benchmark, that means that they are not reading at their grade level. So that's what benchmark means. And that term significantly at risk, that's on the letter. That means that a student is far below grade level. So we have a benchmark, below benchmark, approaching benchmark, and then far below benchmark. So the far below is significantly at risk. What is a diagnostic assessment? Well, we don't diagnose dyslexia. What this term means within the context of the letter is that we give an assessment that pinpoints the specific skill or skills that a student is deficient in. So that's how we know what we need to support them in. And then tiered instruction. That is also referenced in the letter. There are 3 tiers that we use. Tier 1 is for all students in the classroom. Tier 2 is an additional dosage of instruction to students who are approaching benchmark. And then we have Tier 3, which is additional instruction on top of Tier 1 and Tier 2, and that's really focused in a small group setting, focusing on specific skill deficits. So our Tier 1 is in the classroom, our Tier 2 is in the classroom, and then Tier 3 is when a student is in reading lab. All right, so we're going to move on to terminology of foundational skills. This is going to be a little bit of a crash course in foundational skills of reading. So we have 5 main areas of reading skills. We have phonemic awareness or phonological awareness, basic reading and spelling skills, which is phonics, reading fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. Now, students may be struggling in just 1 or 2 areas. They might be struggling in 4 or 5 areas. So this is what the diagnostic helps us drill down. Not just the diagnostic, but the benchmark assessment helps us drill down into the big skill sets that might be deficit. And then the diagnostic helps us drill down into the specific skill deficits for one or more of those skills. So what is phonological phonemic awareness? We're going to use them interchangeably here, although they're not actually interchangeable. But for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to use those terms interchangeably. So phonological awareness is purely auditory. We don't need to be looking at words. It's an auditory skill. So it's a global awareness of speech sounds, such as syllables, rhymes, individual sounds in words, segmenting, blending, and manipulating sounds. Now, what does all that mean? So I always like to use cat because it's easy. So cat has 3 sounds. So when I say cat, I can do this. K, a, t. So I have segmented that word into individual sounds. Now when a student has difficulty with phonemic awareness, they have difficulty with that. You might say, tell me the sounds in cat, and they say cat. They can't isolate each individual sound. So if that's a struggle, and this is the very first foundational skill of reading, if they can't do that, they are then later on going to have difficulty when they go to try to read or spell that word. So this skill is crucial to be able to segment words. Likewise, it's important to be able to blend the sounds together. So if I say, tell me what this word is, a, t. A student with good phonemic awareness skills will say cat. A student who's struggling won't be able to blend those sounds into the word cat. Again, a really crucial foundational skill. If we're struggling with that, that's where we target our instruction. Rhyming is important. Cat rhymes with bat. And we also have what's called onset rhyme. And by the way, most of these terms that I'm going to be using here are in the letter or in those parental strategies that you received. Just really important to be able to define these so that you know what they mean. So when we talk about onset and rhyme, at, we're now breaking that word into its first sound and then the sounds that come after. Now I'm able to isolate the first sound in the word cat, at, and then we can think of other words, at, and so forth. Then moving on to syllables, catnap is made up of 2 syllables. So students start to learn to break words apart into syllables. And then being able to isolate that first sound in a word. That's another foundational reading skill. That is phonemic awareness. And then manipulating sounds. This is where we change a sound to make a new word. So if I want to turn cat into cot, I have to change that vowel. So I can turn cat into cot by sound manipulation. And again, none of this is visual. All of this is auditory. So when children have difficulty with this skill, they have trouble segmenting sounds and they have trouble identifying initial sounds. And the 3 red dots there are something that reading teachers are very familiar with. We use manipulatives. We call those manipulatives. Those would be maybe counters. They could be pennies. They could be anything at all, something tangible, a Lego. And we touch the object for each sound. That makes it tangible. That makes it less abstract. So I can touch those red dots. That helps me kind of see that they are separate sounds. So students who struggle with this skill benefit from sound games. So counting the sounds in words, you can jump the sounds in words, you can do what we call an arm stretch, anything to make it physical and tangible, multisensory, helps a great deal. When I was a kindergarten teacher, my kids loved to talk like a robot. And we would do this when we would be blending sounds. So I might say, I'm going to say a word, or I'm going to say some sounds. You tell me what the word is. So, d, g, and then they would say dog, and then it would be their turn. They say a sound, breaking it into words, talking like a robot. So it's just a bit of fun playing with sounds. And then play I Spy. Who doesn't love I Spy? I spy with my little eye something beginning with ch, ch, ch. Chair. Right, you got it. Very good phonological awareness skills. All right, the next skill is basic reading and spelling skills. This is phonics. So that is letter recognition, just recognizing the letters in the alphabet. And then letter sound correspondence. This is where we know that the A says, the A says A, the B says B. So knowing the sound that the letter represents. Spelling or encoding and sounding out words, which is decoding, they're opposites of each other. So being able to apply knowledge of sound symbol correspondences, and when I say symbol, really it's letters, right? The symbol's the letter that represents the sound. So applying the knowledge of sound symbol correspondences to correctly write and read words. And then advanced phonics is understanding that there are a lot of patterns, a lot of spelling patterns, a lot of ways of spelling some sounds. And then being able to segment syllables into words. That's breaking words up into syllables. And then knowing those meaningful parts of words like prefixes and suffixes and how they change a word. So when children have difficulty with basic reading and spelling skills, they often have difficulty with knowing that the S is represented by this letter S, or that this letter S represents the S sound. And then nonsense word fluency. This is something that is also in the letter, and that's when we come up with words that aren't real, but they are decodable. And that really helps us know if a student is just memorizing words, and that can trick us into thinking, oh, they're great readers, when actually they have just memorized what this chunk of symbols looks like. Or do they really know the sound symbol correspondence of words? And so that's why we practice nonsense word fluency. That's why we use it in assessments, because it really does give us a true indication of whether a student can actually decode words or have they memorized them. So you can see some words there, d, laud. And so a student might at first sound them out and then say it, or they might be able to just say laud, sug, neb. That's when you know they've got it. That's when you know that they can decode words. So for practice, they benefit from practicing learned phonics skills. Now, every teacher will tell you they're not expecting you to teach your kids. If you can practice what they've learned in school, that helps a great deal, because kids, especially kids who are struggling with reading, need a lot of practice. And sometimes there's simply not enough hours in the school day to be able to give some students the practice that they need. And that's why it's so important that parents know how important it is and how they can practice and why it's important. So the skills that they're learning in school, you probably see worksheets coming home, and those are the skills that you can practice with them. So practicing reading and writing words whose sounds and letters have already been learned. We don't want to expect students to read words that have spelling patterns that they've never learned before. We want to make sure we're practicing with them what they have already been taught. And then practice reading those nonsense words for phonetic reinforcement. Again, it would be only for the sounds that they have learned. So phonics, what is phonics? Well, it's just knowing that these symbols represent sounds. So I can hear the word, I can listen to the word ant, and I can go t. I know that's the A letter, that's n, that's t. I'm using my ability to match sounds to letters, and then I can write it and read it. And then advanced phonics is when we're looking at things like digraphs, we're looking at different ways of spelling sounds, R-controlled vowels like or, and then of course all of our sh. Those are things that are more advanced for students. All right, so we're now moving on to reading fluency. Again, something that's noted in the parent letter if you received it. So reading fluency is the ability to read a text accurately, quickly, and with appropriate expression. So it involves being able to recognize letters, so you have to be able to do that first. And then you have to have speed and accuracy in that sound symbol correspondence. I have to know right away what that sound is, what that letter is. And then being able to break words into chunks like syllables and recognize prefixes and suffixes, which are chunks of words. Once we recognize them, it makes reading and writing those words a whole lot easier. And then, of course, being able to read words accurately and being able to read phrases and passages with appropriate expression. We call that prosody, when they can read smoothly with appropriate expression and not chunks of words that are read like this. So we want them to read smoothly. All right, so when they have difficulty with fluency, they have trouble with rapid naming. So they have a hard time remembering quickly, oh yeah, that's J, L, B. If they hesitate with that, they're not fluent in those letters, and we need to keep practicing what those letters are, what those letter sounds are, so that they can recall them quickly. And then oral reading fluency is that reading accurately with appropriate speed and expression. If they're reading in a very halting way and they're missing a lot of words, that's where we stop. Okay, we need to work on accuracy and fluency. And then if they can't read accurately, we go back. Why can't they read accurately? Oh, they don't know all their letter sounds yet. So we need to work on that. And then we need to work on blending those sounds. So children who have difficulty with fluency benefit from just that practice, practice, practice. Some kids will get it quite easily. Others, it will take lots and lots of practice. So practicing letter recognition, practicing their phonics, the letter sound recognition, and practicing identifying syllables, prefixes, and suffixes, and then practicing reading words that they have already learned. And then practicing reading short words and phrases with expression, and then moving on to text. So syllables, every syllable has a vowel, and so we can clap out syllables. So there you have the example of snap and then basket. So when kids can identify syllables, they can now see chunks of words and they can read them more quickly. And also, when it comes to writing, it also improves their writing when they can recognize syllables in words. And just knowing that every syllable has a vowel. And there's lots of fun activities that we can do with syllables. We can see the spider up there, lady, bug. And it's a foundational reading skill for kids to be able to learn those syllables, being able to do it orally and also and auditorially, but being able to recognize it in text as well. So what are affixes? And they are prefixes and suffixes. Affixes is that broad term. So we can see there the root word in this word is accept. So if we come across this long word, unacceptable, wow, that's a long word. How can we make that easier? Well, we can recognize prefixes and suffixes. So the prefix un, if I know that and I recognize that, oh, that's prefix. Okay, so now I'm looking for a root word. There's the root word, and then the able at the end, that's the suffix. So knowing how to identify those can really help kids, because you know what? If you start to look for suffixes and prefixes, you're going to start seeing them everywhere. And they really do help with kids reading and spelling. So here's just an example. The root word is joy. So if we add those prefixes and suffixes, look at how many words that makes. All right, now, second to last thing is vocabulary. So vocabulary is word knowledge, knowing a word. I know that the picture of a shoe is different from the word shoe. I know that S-H-O-E, that's a word, okay? So just knowing what words are. And then what do they mean? And then the morphemic elements are what we've already talked about, syllables, compound, we haven't talked about compound words, but those are the big groups like playground. Now I'm not going to think of any, but you know what compound words are. Prefixes and suffixes, which we just talked about. So knowing those parts of words can establish meaning, and meaning has to do with vocabulary. So when they have difficulty with vocabulary, they have difficulty understanding word meanings. They might have difficulty identifying those word chunks, the syllables, compound words, prefixes, and suffixes, and they will benefit from doing things like matching pictures to words like you see there, acting out words, playing guess my word. Think of a word, act it out. Have mom guess what it is. Practicing identifying different parts of words. So being able to start recognizing, oh, table. That has 2 syllables, table. Carpet. Compound word parts. There's one, basketball. Got one. Prefixes, unafraid, dislike. You're like really starting to hear and see those prefixes and suffixes. And then also vocabulary words should be introduced when we're learning new words, just small amounts, not a huge amount, small amounts at a time. Use them a lot in your sentences, make up silly sentences with the new words that we're learning. All right, and lastly, comprehension. And that is understanding what was read. Technically, that should say reading comprehension, but I believe they just used the word comprehension in the letter. So that's what I used here. But we're talking about understanding what was read. But it's important to understand that comprehension doesn't have to have anything to do with reading necessarily. Comprehension is just understanding language and understanding what is meant when someone is just talking to you. You have to have comprehension for that. So it's retelling what was read, being able to retell, being able to recall the sequence of events in a story, identifying characters, main events, and details. And then maze, this is a word that was in the letter that my parent team said, what's that? Now we definitely need to define that. So maze is just a practice of being able to choose the correct word out of 3 in a sentence or in a passage. So you have part of a sentence, and then there's 3 choices, and you have to pick one. And then very closely associated with that is the close procedure, which is being able to insert a missing word in a sentence or a passage, given a bank of words to choose from. So some examples, in the next slide. So when we have difficulty with comprehension, it's having difficulty understanding what they read. I just read this book and I have no idea what I just read. Being able to recall or retell what they have read. They might be able to read it, they might be able to decode the words, but they don't necessarily have comprehension. They benefit from activities like matching sentences to pictures that represent the sentence, putting sequences of events in order, either with sentences or pictures, comparing events and characters of 2 different stories, and discussing the most important facts from an informational text. But we also have to recognize that if we're having difficulty with comprehension, it could very well be that we can't read the words on the page. And that's why we're not comprehending what we're learning. So we have to really pay attention. Can they read the words? Yes, but they can't recall what they read. That's a comprehension problem. Are they having trouble reading the words and they don't know what they read? That's a phonics problem, and we need to reinforce phonics skills so that they can decode the words. All right, so here's some examples of some comprehension activities. So we can see matching pictures with sentences, and then here Amir makes a sandwich. We read this little passage, and then we say, what happened first? What did he do first? What did he do second? What did he do last? And you can see the sentences are on the bottom, and they are just put in order. So that helps with that sequencing, the ability to sequence. And then comparing 2 stories and recalling facts. Here's facts about bats. Graphic organizers help a lot. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, who is going to talk about the SUSD Family Reading Connection.
Well, hello, everyone, and everyone at home. My name's Lisa Kogan, and I'm a parent of 2 struggling readers here at 2 different campuses in Sarita Unified School District. And well, like many of you, if you're parents that are here and you have kids that struggle, I think a lot about what can I do to help my kids get better with their reading. And it's not just getting that homework done at the end of the day. What can I do to help them so that they can really catch up with where they need to be? So Jan did a really nice job of talking about how our group came together. We have district support. We have some teachers that are going to be working with us. And I think our greatest resource is each other as parents. And I personally have found so much value in listening to the stories of other parents, finding out, well, that their story is the same as my kids with what they're struggling with, but also finding out, wow, that worked. So that's how you did it. Okay, I didn't think about approaching it from that way. Just different strategies, ways that I can help my children become better with their reading. So together, this is kind of a new group, and we are the Sarita United, or I'm sorry, what is it, Unified School District Family Reading Connection. And what we want to do is we want to find different ways to help each other and to support you so that when you're sitting there working with your kids on their homework or trying to go through some of these strategies, you have some better tools in your toolkit to think about how you can help your kiddos back at home. We would love to hear from you, to hear your stories as well, and to see what ways we can support you. Some of the things that we talk about when we meet together, it's not just our challenges, things that we're struggling with. It's also, as I mentioned, those ways that this works in my house. Have you tried it this way? We have the benefit of educators on our team as well, and experts from our local community that have been chiming in from their expertise, the way that they work with kids, either in a classroom or a small group setting. So different tips, tricks, things we can try. We also spend a lot of time talking about the different resources that are available. And I learned something new. I learned something new when I walked in the door tonight. We had someone from the local library here, and she was talking about some homework support that's being provided to older students, as well as some other resources they provide. So there's really a lot, and it can be sometimes overwhelming how much is available in our community. There's so much that I don't know, but maybe I know something that you don't know, and you know something I don't know. So we get together and we share and just help ourselves kind of navigate these different resources that are available to help us. We help each other, so that way we can provide even better support to our kids. So we would love to have you join us, meet with us. I think we'll be sharing our email addresses with you. So if you're not here tonight, please contact me. My name is Lisa Kogan. We have some other parents that you can contact. Of course, you can contact Jan as well, and find out a little bit more about some of the resources that we can support you with finding out about. As I said, finding or listening to your specific story, seeing how we can help you. We meet together and we just kind of think through this and help each other, because it's can be a little overwhelming, and it can be a little bit different depending on what your child needs, and that might be different from my child needs. So, well, thank you, and Heather and I hope to have many emails from all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. There is a sign-up sheet. There's 2 clipboards here. If you would like to put your name, email, address, we can contact you and let you know more about the group. Invite you to our first meeting. We haven't actually had a meeting yet. We're just in the very, very initial stages of this. So spread the word to your friends and let them know that this is available. The plan is to do monthly Zoom meetings that will involve a speaker, someone to deliver an inspirational story perhaps someone who has gone through reading struggles. We already have a couple of folks lined up who are who have dyslexia, who have gone on to become very successful people, and they have inspiring stories. And then we, of course, support one another, have a chance to talk, and then we're always going to have a topic to talk about, a foundational reading skill that we might learn more about. And that can be an opportunity for you to dig deeper into these subjects, these skills that perhaps your child might be struggling with. And we're also gauging the interest from this group. We will be gauging the interest of having parent workshops in how to support your child at home with reading, digging even deeper into the skills and how they can be supported at home. So with that, we will open it up to questions. Would that be first grade, second grade? Yeah, I think that would be in, like Kim was saying, first and second grade. So we're talking about prefixes and suffixes for the benefit of the folks on live stream when they're introduced. So depending on the complexity of the suffix and the prefix from first to third. So the basic prefixes and suffixes like the ed, ing are pretty early on. But I can't tell you exactly, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes. So the question is it third grade where we really have to catch kids? That's the point at which they stop learning to read and start reading to learn. So those foundational skills that we've just gone through are covered in kindergarten through all the way through second grade and some through third grade as well. But in terms of reading proficiency, if a student is not reading proficiently by third grade, and this was really the crux of the Move On When Reading legislation, is that we have to catch those students before they move on. Because if we don't catch them and give them the interventions that they need, they're going to struggle more and more as they grapple with content and not being able to decode the words that in books and now textbooks that don't have pictures. And there are no ways of being able to decode a word if you don't know how to decode a word. So yes. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So great question. I'm going to answer part of it, and then I'm going to pass on to Jess Bonnier because she's the Director of Student Services and she oversees all IEPs. So, so glad you're here, Jess. Yes, we're a great team. We're all a great team. So, students who have IEPs are exempt from the Move On When Reading legislation. So you can take that off your shoulders. You don't have to worry about that. But that doesn't answer your question. Your question, the important thing is, what do I do? I don't think he's getting this. If what I'm hearing you're not feeling like he's getting this kind of instruction that I've just described. Okay, so could you contact me? Contact me and we can talk. And then Jess, would you like to address the other part of that question?
Sure. And then when you contact Jan, you can also get my I don't have my cards with me, my contact information from Jan. My recommendation would be to bring your concerns to your son's case manager at the school. Do you know who that is? She's the school psychologist. Do you know who Can we talk tomorrow? Okay, so that I can find out who that is, and then my recommendation would be to bring it to the case manager and potentially to the IEP team to determine if there's already an identified reading disability and what are the interventions that are being provided or the specially designed instruction being provided to address those needs. And if there's not an identified reading disability, are there any concerns about whether or not there's a disability in terms of reading, along with whatever else. But yeah, I'll write down my information for you, and then.
Did you get my information, my contact information? It's the top one there. Thank you. Okay, yes. So the question is, if we suspect that our child may be dyslexic, what is the route that we can take? So first and foremost, we do interventions in the classroom. So we use the screening data that we've just had from our first benchmark assessment, and we use that information to discover what the specific skill deficits are. So students with dyslexia, and we do have a dyslexia specialist here, Cheryl. So Cheryl, if there's anything that you would like to add after I answer, please do. Feel free to chime in. And then Jess, of course, too. So first and foremost, we try to address it in the classroom. So that tiered instruction that we talked about. So if we have a student who's struggling, who we can see through the assessment that they are struggling in certain areas, they go into tier 2 instruction. 8 to 10 weeks, if they're not making progress in tier 2 instruction, we move on to reading lab, that tier 3 instruction where they're in smaller groups and it's more skill focused. And then if they're not making progress with that, that could go to a child study team, and we might be looking at an IEP. So because dyslexia is a spectrum, a lot of students can be supported in the classroom, given the right instruction with tier 2, that high level intervention, or tier 3, that even higher level of intervention. So if it's not happening within that tiered, multi-tiered system of support, then we look for other reasons why there might be a problem. Yeah. Right, right. So Jess or Cheryl, would you like to address that question about seeking a diagnosis? Because we've talked about this with our group. We've talked about this. And so recognizing that schools don't diagnose and we can't refer you for diagnosis, there are specialists in the area like Cheryl who do that sort of service. So Cheryl, if you want to respond, and then Jess can respond after that.
Right, you would want to speak with a clinical psychologist or get a psychoeducational assessment. There are some screenings that can let you know, am I on the right track here? There are some symptoms lists you could certainly take a look at to say, okay, does this run in my family? It is an inherited condition. So does that run in my family? Is there a history of that? Kind of what was my child's history, from early on? And then make that decision if you would like to pursue a diagnostic assessment. And there are some places in Tucson. I'm researching those right now, actually, to see what that might look like for parents. Or you can get a simple screening if you just want to have an idea. Oh, okay, yeah, this really does look like dyslexia, and how can I support my child if that's the case? Mm-hmm. And there are many psychologists, right, that they absolutely will work with people with dyslexia. Most insurance companies do not cover assessment for dyslexia. If there's a coexisting condition, they'll often cover that coexisting condition. So it can be a little bit tricky there, but certainly it's worth talking with your insurance provider about that. So there's definitely support out there.
It's not really the question, but from a school perspective, if there's a suspected educational disability, so a disability that's impacting access or progress in the curriculum, the school district can conduct a school-based special education evaluation to determine if the student has an educational disability, once again, that impedes access. And the third piece of that, so first is, does the student have a disability? And does the student have an educational disability? The second is, does the student have an educational disability that impedes access or progress in the general education curriculum? And then the third prong that has to be answered is whether or not they need specially designed instruction in order to close that gap in terms of access. And I had a second thought on that, which will come back to me in a second. Through that process, in terms of dyslexia, we don't look at dyslexia, but we look at whether or not there's a reading disability present, and typically can say whether or not there are indicators that are similar to the indicators of dyslexia. We look at whether or not there's a specific a learning disability. Well, we can look at a number of different disabilities. In this instance, it would be looking at whether or not there's a specific learning disability in the areas of reading, writing, or math, and then we can break down where those markers are in each of the three reading, writing, or math areas. But we don't diagnose whether or not a student has dyslexia or not.
I would really recommend that you join the group. Look at them nodding there. Yeah. We can offer some support by talking to other parents. I know they have resources that they have used, and then please contact me if you have additional questions and concerns that you would like addressed. If you could contact me. Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Mm-hmm.
Can you? Oh, I can talk loud enough. No, I think it's on. There I go. So I'm Kim Snyder, the reading specialist at Copperview, and I just want to remind parents, because I've had parents ask me about this. When I'm working on specific skills in the reading lab, if I'm working with a second grader on a very, basic phonics skill, say it's something like blends using short vowel sounds, a lot of times I'll have parents say, well, my student still isn't reading at grade level. And so the goal in the reading lab is to get a student mastering and specific skills for phonics that will eventually help them later on. So it is important to realize that we are working in the reading lab really hard with these kids, but when we are working on specific skills and trying to kind of fix that scaffold, if they are very, what do they compare it to, Swiss cheese, all the holes in the foundation. So if the foundation is weak, we really have to come in and start with some really low skills. I know I've got third graders that don't know letter sounds right now. So am I going to get that child reading a third grade passage by tomorrow? No way on earth is that going to happen. So we are working really hard with kids on those foundational skills, the phonemic awareness, phonics, a little bit of fluency in there and stuff like that. So we are seeing progress, but we really look at progress in the skills that we're working on. Grade level, it's really important to think that we would not be working on I know in my reading lab anyway, comprehension, we're just not doing that in there.
Thank you, Kim. Mm-hmm.
Name again? Okay, Kim, hi. My children have 2 reading specialists because they're at 2 different campuses. But as a parent, one of the things that I found that was really helpful, not just meeting and talking with the classroom teachers about some specific areas that they're struggling or how I can help them with their classwork or their homework at the other sites. So specifically, Jan, you talked about it a little bit earlier. How do we practice those skills the same way that you're teaching them so that we can reinforce that at home? And I'm not a reading interventionist, so I don't know what that looks like and sounds like. But being able to talk with them and have them show me or break that down has been really, really helpful. So I would just encourage other parents. Sometimes we just always reach out to the classroom teacher and we forget all the good work that you do. So thank you.
Thanks for that. So know that one of the reasons that we wanted to come together like this is to capture the questions that you have. Because if you have a question like that, you have a question, we know that other parents do too. And it's really important for us to be able to capture your questions, identify parents who still have questions and need more support. And that is what we're here for. And that's why I ask you, please contact me, contact anyone else there, join the group that we're going to be forming, because we've got ADHD, we've got dyslexia, we've got other reading struggles. It's a community of people that want to support you. And so please consider joining us. Yes. Yes. It goes from K through 3, and in some schools, it depends on the school, sometimes 4th and 5th graders are serviced as well. It's Title I schools, is that right, that go up to 5th grade for reading lab? And SMS? Oh, yes, and SMS 6 to 8. Right. Yeah, there's just goes to 3rd grade. Yeah. So is your student within that grade level band? Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Just wanted to make sure that. Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm sure she is. Okay. Yeah. Well, we're going to be, that's okay. I just saw the time at 7:04, and what we'll do is we will hang out here for as long as you have questions. We'll end the meeting and stop the recording, and we will be here to answer your questions. Thank you so much for coming. The librarian, I hope maybe is still out there. Great resources there. Don't forget handouts, and please sign up to join our group. We would love to have you, and we will grow and grow.